It all began on a chilly January morning in 2023 when Anna Meyers, a 28-year-old waitress at a quiet diner in Los Angeles, was unexpectedly fired for what seemed like an act of kindness. The reason? She had gone out of her way to help a customer, a man she didn't even recognize at first, until the world-famous actor Keanu Reeves pulled off his baseball cap and gave her a humble, grateful smile. Anna hadn't thought much of it. Keanu had stopped by the diner late one evening, clearly exhausted and looking like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. She had been wrapping up her shift when she noticed his wallet had fallen beneath his booth. Without hesitation, she grabbed it and jogged out into the brisk night to catch him before he drove off. "Sir, you forgot this," she called out, catching him just as he was unlocking the door of a modest black sedan. Keanu turned, startled, and for a moment, Anna saw a flicker of something in his eyes, relief, gratitude, and something she couldn't quite place. "Keanu Reeves," she muttered in surprise. "Thank you," he murmured. He hesitated before adding, "You didn't even look inside, did you?" Anna shook her head, a little confused. "Why would I?" she replied with a laugh. But when her manager found out the next morning, everything changed. "You went outside the diner during your shift?" And for some random customer, her manager barked, not giving her a chance to explain. "We can't have that kind of carelessness here, Anna. I'm sorry, but you're fired." Shocked and devastated, Anna tried to plead her case, but her words fell on deaf ears. With a tear-streaked face, she packed her things and left the diner, clutching the small box that contained her belongings. The next day, as she sat in her tiny apartment wondering how she'd pay rent, the news broke. Keanu Reeves had announced something that would not only shake his own world but touch Anna's life in a way she never imagined. It wasn't a scandal or a new film. It was a heartfelt story about an angel of kindness who reminded him why humanity was still worth believing in. "Someone out there didn't treat me like a celebrity," he said in a candid interview. "She treated me like a human being when I needed it the most." Anna stared at the television, her breath catching in her throat. He was talking about her. But what Keanu revealed next left her frozen in place, tears streaming down her cheeks. Keanu's voice on the television was steady but tinged with vulnerability, something that caught Anna off guard. She hadn't expected him to speak about her, let alone in such a raw and emotional way. "That night," he said, pausing to take a deep breath, "I had just come from visiting someone I care about deeply. Someone who's no longer here. I wasn't sure I'd be able to keep it together, and then this stranger, this woman, went out of her way to help me. Not because I'm anyone special. Just because she cared." Anna felt her chest tighten as she watched his face on the screen. There was something haunting in his expression, a sadness that mirrored her own in ways she didn't quite understand. He continued, "In that moment, I realized that even when life feels unbearable, kindness can pull us back. She didn't know me. Didn't expect anything. She just saw a person in need and acted. That night changed me." Anna sat back on her worn-out couch, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. For a fleeting moment, she felt like the universe had nudged her toward something she couldn't yet see. But as the story unfolded, the weight of her own troubles pressed down on her again. She was still jobless, still unsure of how she'd make ends meet. Then came the twist that took her breath away. "I've been looking for her," Keanu said, glancing at the camera with a determined gaze. "I don't know her name, but if she's out there, I just want to say thank you. And if there's any way I can repay her kindness, I'll do whatever it takes." Anna's phone buzzed. It was a text from her friend Lydia. "Anna, isn't this about you? You're all over the news." The realization hit her like a tidal wave. The small act of kindness she'd thought nothing of had spiraled into something far bigger than she could have imagined. But with that realization came fear. Keanu Reeves was looking for her. What would she even say to him if he found her? Would he think less of her now that she was broke and jobless? The next morning, Anna stepped out into the frosty Los Angeles air, bundled in her thrift store coat. She needed to clear her head. But as she walked down the street, lost in thought, she failed to notice the black sedan that had just parked at the curb. "Excuse me," came a familiar, gentle voice. She froze, turning slowly. Anna came face to face with Keanu Reeves. His eyes softened as recognition lit up his face. "It's you," he said, his voice almost a whisper. Anna's breath caught in her throat. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but no words came out. Keanu gave her a small smile, one filled with the same kindness she'd shown him that night. "I've been looking for you." And just like that, the moment shifted. It wasn't about fame or charity. It was two strangers standing in the cold, bound by a fleeting connection that neither of them fully understood, but both felt deeply. Anna finally found her voice. I didn't think you'd remember me." "How could I forget?" he replied, his tone heavy with sincerity. "You reminded me of something I thought I'd lost." He hesitated, as though unsure of how much to share. "And now? I'd like to return the favor." Before Anna could respond, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from her landlord. The rent was overdue. The eviction notice was coming next. Panic began to set in, but she masked it quickly, not wanting Keanu to see. What she didn't realize was that he had already noticed. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, concern flickering in his dark eyes. Anna forced a smile, but tears were already welling up. "I'm fine," she lied. And that's when Keanu did something that left her completely speechless. His gaze didn't waver, his concern cutting through Anna's weak attempt at pretending she was fine. He tilted his head slightly, as if trying to read the truth in her expression. Before Anna could say anything else, he gently said, "You don't have to tell me what's wrong. But I can see something is." The weight of everything Anna had been carrying suddenly felt unbearable. She shook her head, tears threatening to spill. "It's nothing," she whispered, her voice breaking. Keanu's hand hovered for a moment before he hesitantly reached out, as though unsure if it was okay. When Anna didn't flinch, he placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "Anna," he said softly. The way he said her name, like it was the most important thing in the world, broke her completely. The tears came fast now, hot and unstoppable. "I lost my job," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I can't pay my rent. I don't know what I'm going to do." She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling exposed and vulnerable in a way she hadn't since she was a child. Keanu's expression shifted. It wasn't pity. It was something deeper, a kind of understanding that made Anna feel seen. "You were fired because of what you did for me, weren't you?" She nodded reluctantly, wiping at her eyes. "It doesn't matter. I'll figure it out." Keanu took a step closer, lowering his voice. "It does matter. You didn't deserve that. You helped someone, and the world needs more people like you. Let me help." Anna shook her head quickly. "No, I can't let you." "You didn't hesitate to help me," he interrupted, his tone firm but kind. "You didn't ask for anything. Let me return the favor." Before she could protest again, Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it out to her, and when she hesitated, he smiled gently. "Just take it." Anna slowly unfolded the paper, her eyes widening as she realized what it was. A check. The amount written on it was more money than she had ever seen in her life. Her hands trembled as she looked up at him, her voice barely audible. I can't accept this. It's too much." Keanu's smile turned bittersweet. "It's not about the money, Anna. It's about what you did for me. You gave me something I hadn't felt in years, hope. This is my way of saying thank you. Please." Anna stared at him, torn between gratitude and guilt. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Keanu said softly. Just promise me one thing. What? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't let the world take your kindness away, he said, his eyes locking with hers. It's rare. And it's powerful. Don't lose it. For the first time in days, Anna felt a flicker of hope. But before she could respond, Keanu hesitated, his expression growing somber again. There's something else, he said quietly. Something I didn't tell you that night. Anna frowned, her heart pounding as she saw the pain flicker across his face. What is it? Keanu's voice dropped, barely above a whisper. That night, I had just come from the hospital. My sister, she's fighting cancer. He paused, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I didn't know if she was going to make it. I felt so lost. Anna's breath hitched as she saw the raw emotion in his eyes. Instinctively, she reached out, her hand brushing his arm. I'm so sorry, she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. Keanu gave her a small, sad smile. You didn't just return my wallet that night. You reminded me that even in the darkest moments, there's still light. His voice softened. And now, I want to be that light for you. Anna's tears flowed freely as she realized the depth of his words. This wasn't about charity or guilt. It was about two people who had unknowingly saved each other in ways neither could fully understand. And in that moment, standing on the cold, busy streets of Los Angeles, they both felt something shift. Keanu felt a connection with Anna that went beyond chance or circumstance. But life was never that simple. As he opened his mouth to say more, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his face darkening as he read the message. I have to go, he said reluctantly, his voice filled with regret. But this isn't the end, Anna. I promise. Before she could respond, he gently squeezed her shoulder and turned to leave. Anna stood there, clutching the check in her hands, her heart heavy with gratitude and confusion. She didn't know what would happen next, but something told her this was only the beginning of a story neither of them could have predicted. As Anna stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching Keanu disappear into the crowd, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. She clutched the check tightly, but her focus wasn't on the money, it was on the strange, unexpected bond she felt with a man whose life seemed so far removed from her own. She wiped at her tears, inhaling sharply. This isn't real, she whispered to herself. But it was. That evening, Anna returned to her small apartment, the check still in her hand. She placed it on the kitchen counter, staring at it as if it might vanish. The amount was more than enough to change her life, to pull her out of the spiral she'd been in. Yet a part of her hesitated. It felt like too much, too fast. Her phone buzzed again. It was her friend Lydia. You need to see this. Now. Anna clicked on the link Lydia had sent. It led to a video of Keanu standing outside a hospital, speaking to a group of reporters. She's my rock, he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. My sister has always been the strongest person I know. And while she's fighting this battle, I've realized how important it is to have people who remind you to keep going. He paused, his gaze lowering for a moment. There's someone out there who reminded me of that. Someone I hope knows how much they've done for me. Anna's heart sank as the camera panned to his sister, a frail woman with a kind smile, being helped into the hospital by a nurse. Despite her pale complexion and the weight of her illness visible in every step, she radiated warmth. Tears streamed down Anna's face. Keanu wasn't just being kind. He was carrying a burden she couldn't fathom. And yet, he had taken the time to look for her, to try and make her life better, even when his own was crumbling. The following morning, Anna made a decision. She folded the check carefully and slipped it into her bag. This wasn't about charity. This was about something deeper, a connection she couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. She went to the hospital. When she arrived, she hesitated at the entrance, unsure if she'd even be allowed to see him. Just as she was working up the courage to ask, a nurse walked by and gave her a knowing smile. "You're Anna, aren't you?" Anna blinked, startled. "How?" "He mentioned you," the nurse said softly, gesturing for her to follow. "Come on." They led her through winding hallways to a quiet room. Through the small window on the door, Anna saw Keanu sitting by his sister's bed, holding her hand and speaking to her in hushed tones. His expression was tender but heavy, his shoulders hunched under the weight of his worry. The nurse opened the door slightly and gestured for Anna to step inside. Keanu looked up, his eyes widening in surprise. "Anna," he said, rising to his feet. I hope I'm not interrupting," she said quickly, her voice trembling. His sister, her voice soft but cheerful, smiled warmly. "Is this her, Keanu?" Keanu nodded, his gaze never leaving Anna's face. "Yeah," he said quietly. "This is her." Anna stepped closer, feeling a lump in her throat as she looked at his sister. "Hi," she said softly. "I'm Anna." "I've heard a lot about you," his sister said, her smile kind despite the exhaustion in her eyes. "Thank you for taking care of my brother. He needs people like you." Anna glanced at Keanu, her heart aching at the vulnerability she saw in his expression. "I didn't do anything special," she said, her voice cracking. Keanu shook his head. "You did more than you realize," he said. For the next hour, Anna sat with them, talking quietly about everything and nothing. She learned about his sister's love for painting, her childhood memories with Keanu, and her determination to fight the illness that had taken so much from her. As the evening wore on, Anna felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of belonging, of purpose. But as she prepared to leave, Keanu walked her to the hallway, his expression serious. "Anna," he said softly. "I don't think you realize how much you've changed my life." She looked up at him, tears brimming in her eyes. "You've changed mine too." He hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "I don't want this to be the last time we see each other." Anna's breath caught. "It doesn't have to be," she whispered. For a moment, they stood there, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between them. And then, as if the universe itself had plans they couldn't foresee, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face tightening. "It's the doctor," he said. Anna nodded, stepping back. "Go," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. But as Keanu walked away, he turned back, his gaze locking with hers. "This isn't goodbye," he said firmly. Anna stood there, her heart full of hope and uncertainty, as the door closed behind him.